Hi all, I see we have some folks streaming in now. I'm just going to give it about 15 more seconds to let people get into the room. Thanks for being here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just one logistical point. We're going to have a question and answer sort of discussion session at the end of this. If you have questions for the speakers, please go ahead and place them in the Q&A feature of the Zoom. That is where we will be pulling questions from when we get to that section of today's presentation. With that, I turn it over to Attorney General Josh Stein.
Ellen, thank you for helping to coordinate all of this. I want to wish everybody a good afternoon and thank you for joining us in this webinar. The opioid crisis is hitting all of us very close to home. It has taken the lives of approximately 20,000 North Carolinians, and tragically, it's raging worse than it ever has. 2020, the last full year for which we had data, was the deadliest year in the deadliest drug epidemic in American history, and we believe 2021 was worse. The core message of today's session is we want North Carolinians who are struggling with addiction and all of the thousands of people who love those people struggling with addiction to know this: help is on the way, recovery is possible, don't give up. We're going to be talking a little bit about how that help is going to come to North Carolina and the role that our diverse faith communities across the state are playing to keep people with substance use disorder alive and to connect them with treatment programs that are proven to work. How did we get to this point of crisis? Tragically, it was greed of big pharmaceutical companies that made billions and billions of dollars while millions of Americans got hooked on pills. They helped to create and fuel this crisis. And so I led a national bipartisan coalition of attorneys general from all across this country to take Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, other drug companies to court to hold them accountable. We had, and we're winning, $26 billion. We finalized a settlement with the 3 drug distributors, Johnson & Johnson, earlier this year. And of that $26 billion, almost all of it has to go to tackling the crisis. The companies made the first installment payment to the settlement administrator, and we anticipate North Carolina getting its first payment later this month or early next month. Our state share of that $26 billion is $750 million. We have front-loaded the $750. It's over the whole term of the deal, which is 18 years, but we front-loaded it so that about the first 40% will be paid in the first 5 years. And as I mentioned, the first payment will be done later this month. Payments 2, 3, and 4 will come at the end of the summer, and then thereafter, they will come every 12 months in the summertime. 85% of the funds of that $750 million that's coming to North Carolina is going to go to local governments, predominantly to our counties, but also some of the big cities. 15% will go to the state. But regardless of which level of government receives the money, it has to be invested in evidence-based solutions to help save lives, whether it's through treatment, recovery, prevention, or harm reduction strategies. Many faith communities have been serving people of their congregations in this way, in these different types of ways for many years. And I want to especially recognize the North Carolina Council of Churches, which has been a leader in this kind of work for some time. For instance, Elizabeth Brewington has been focused on using a harm reduction approach to help people in faith communities combat addiction and address the opioid crisis. Today, we're going to hear from several people who do that kind of work with Olive Branch Ministry. It's a faith-based harm reduction organization that operates in 9 Western North Carolina counties. The stories that you're going to hear today are deeply personal and incredibly inspiring. They are proof that even in times of darkness, we can find light. And in some cases, we can become the light for others. Our faiths call on us to help others. A central tenet of my Jewish faith is repairing the world, or tikkun olam. My faith teaches me that each of us has an obligation to do our part to make this world better for others in addition to ourselves. I know that this value drives Olive Branch Ministries and this work, as it does so many other faith organizations throughout the state. You're going to hear from Olive Branch today that faith is their why and harm reduction is their what. And I look forward to hearing those stories, and learning from the strength and their courage. I hope that all of the viewers of today's webinar come away similarly inspired, because for us to turn the tide on this ravaging epidemic, we have to put our shoulders to the wheel together. So let's get started with our speakers, and I'll introduce them one by one as we go through. And our first speaker is going to be Reverend Reggie Longcrier. He has been a prison chaplain for 30 years. He is also a former inmate. He's the senior pastor of Exodus Missionary Outreach in Hickory and is also the executive director and founder of Exodus Homes. Reverend Longcrier, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here this morning to participate in this session. As was said, my name is Reggie Longcrier. I'm an executive director and founder of Exodus Homes, which is a faith-based supportive housing program for recovering alcoholics, addicts, and returning citizens coming from our prisons and detoxes and treatment centers throughout the state and even outside of the state. We have a 73-bed capacity. We take both men and women. We have a social enterprise program in which we do residential, commercial, moving, landscaping, and painting, and various odd jobs and hoarder jobs throughout the county. We take both men and women who are returning to our communities. As we say, faith-based, we're people of faith that are involved in the work of faith, meaning that, we have on our board of directors, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have Christians, and we have Jewish folks. We have our residents come in as Muslims, Christians, atheists, the whole gambit. They're not mandated to attend church. That's an alternative track. We have a 12-step meeting. We have two 12-step meetings on the weekdays, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On other days, we have outside meetings. We take our residents to NA and AA meetings, the church, various other workshops, and even conventions throughout the state. We have people who are working for reunification to get their children back after recovery. We have many who have graduated from the program or have gone on to be productive citizens in the community. When we talk about harm reduction, at first I kicked against it. I'm from the old school. I had spent about 25, 30 years of addiction in my first part of my life, and I was an intravenous heroin user. And I knew about the methadone maintenance programs and what have you up north. And as a result of that, I was a bit more against the harm reduction methods of Suboxone and what have you, until I heard the folks from Olive Branch, Miss Michelle Mathis. And she was I was so impressed at her introduction and her explanation of harm reduction until I came back to rethink our methods of helping people. In fact, the Sheriff's Department reached out to us, and also United Way, asking would we be able to house some people who were on Suboxone and what have you. Having heard Michelle Mathis and having to rethink that, another way of helping folks to get there, giving them time to get there. And oftentimes we have used other methods, and you would refer to them as harm reductive methods, that seem a bit radical, but they're helpful. And so as a result of that, we have a Mars program, and we've taken several residents to our programs who are currently on Suboxone and now continue to work a productive program. They're working in our program and they're doing well. So I'll stop there and leave room for questions later on.
Thank you so much, Reverend Longcrier. That was very informative and frankly inspiring, because so many of us, we have our opinions, and once we get set in our ways, we don't always listen to new ideas. And so I'm impressed with your willingness to think about, to consider new approaches, because I'm sure what you've been doing for a long time was working for you, and you're still willing to consider other ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, medication-assisted therapies is the gold standard for treating people with opioid use disorder. There are some addictions for which there isn't a medication. You know, if you're addicted to methamphetamines or cocaine, there isn't a medication that actually works. But with opioids, thank goodness there is. And some people, you know, they can overcome their addiction through 12-step and without any kind of medication. But for most people, for it to succeed, you know, MAT is the gold standard and the recommended treatment. So I think it's wonderful that you are including people of all types who need that kind of help. Our next presenter is going to be Gary Dolan, and Gary has an inspiring personal journey from a past of drug use to recovery, and I think he's going to share that with us now. Gary, you can unmute yourself, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Good. I apologize. I just left the dentist not even an hour ago. But I was an addict for over 12 years. Started off with pain pills and ended up going to heroin. I've been in and out of jail many, many times because of what I'd done during that time. I ended up overdosing in front of my wife and daughter for the first time that they saw it. And my wife kept me alive for well over an hour, giving me CPR and Narcan. She dosed me with Narcan 9 times, and I was still dead in the floor. And the EMTs finally got there, and they dosed me with Narcan. I think it was 11 times. And the EMT that was dosing me had to keep asking for permission for her supervisor on a radio to dose me again, because they could have killed me with the Narcan. So on the 12th dose that she gave me, her supervisor said, administer one more dose and call it. And I guess God was looking out for me that day or something, I don't know. But they gave me that dose and I woke up. And the next morning I was at McLeod. But I had met Michelle and Karen with Olive Branch at the height of my addiction, basically. And we had talked and got close and everything. And the Narcan that was used to save my life, that my wife used, I got from Karen and Michelle. And I have used that Narcan on multiple other people too. I think a lot of people have like a misconception with the whole faith-based part of it, because I wasn't at the time a very spiritual person. So I was kind of reluctant in that aspect, because I was thinking it was going to be all, you know, church and this and that. And I found out real quick that it's not that. So I think a lot of people need to understand that it doesn't matter, you know, what your religion or faith is, that it can still help you. And without a doubt, if it weren't for the Harm Reduction Coalition and Olive Branch, I would not be alive, without a doubt. So I'm extremely thankful for that. And every day I take every opportunity I can to try to help anyone I can. As a matter of fact, I saved someone at McDonald's parking lot with Narcan from Olive Branch one day. I think that's about all I can really think of to say. If there's anything else or any questions, I'd be more than happy to address it.
Well, Gary, that's great. We're going to have questions for you and Reverend Longcrier at the end. And basically, if anybody in the webinar has any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. And Ellen, who welcomed us at the beginning, will, at the end of the presentations, kind of collate all those and ask the presenters questions. But I just want to say thank you, Gary, for Well, for one, I know you're in pain from your tooth. So the fact that you stepped up and like you said before we got online, you said you were going to do it. And so you're going to do it. And that kind of commitment is highly commendable. And yours is a truly inspiring story. And thank you for being willing to share with others, because we need folks to know who are struggling that there is hope. And you're a perfect example of that. So much appreciation. Our next presenter is Tim Nolan. Tim is a nurse practitioner who's been specializing in HIV care, hepatitis C treatment, and substance use issues for over 30 years. Tim volunteers with Olive Branch Ministry and works for the Catawba Valley Medical Center in Hickory. He also works with the High Country Community Health Center in Morganton. Tim, looking forward to hear your comments.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. I was asked to talk about some of the work that Olive Branch is doing in developing what's been now is termed as low barrier medication assisted treatment or low threshold care. And in discussing this, I'm going to talk about the what first and then the why afterwards. But I like to start out with just saying how this all got started. And it was through meeting a patient. I was treating him, a young, actively injecting drug user in Morganton. I was treating him in the clinic setting for his chronic hep C. And at the same time, I was also supplying him with clean supplies as he continued to inject, as I didn't want him to reinfect himself once we treated and cured him. So supplying him with clean access to syringes through Olive Branch and my work with them. But at one point in one visit, he said, you know, doc, there's a lot of folks, all my friends, they don't even come to clinics like this. And so in that moment, in my head, I said, then we need to take treatment to where they're at. And so the previous 2 years prior to that, I'd been volunteering my evenings with Olive Branch, delivering syringe services to folks in the rural Catawba and county area. And so I just added on to that, inviting folks who I encountered, let us host a hepatitis C testing gathering in your setting. And their setting could be wherever I met them, in their trailer, in a tent, in their garage, in their car, or in a trap house. And that program just kind of took off. And since February of 2020, we've engaged over 100 hepatitis C actively injecting folks in care and treatment. We've cured over half of them, and we've only lost 20 of them to care, who had started care and then lost them. And with this population, that's pretty decent. But in that project, we also kept encountering folks who said, I just so much want to get out of this cycle. I so much want to get off this lifestyle. And after many invitations, come to the clinic, just show up. I'll help you with MAT. And never one of them showing. We determined that we need to take treatment again to them, that they need to access treatment in their setting, whether they can't get there because of lack of money, lack of transportation, mental illness, or just plain old poverty and chaos, that we need to take our treatment to them. And so we're doing that. We have a low barrier MAT program, and it's working. It has so much potential, and it's so exciting. And with me as the provider and 2 Olive Branch women, peer support women who meet with our participants regularly, it's just a very exciting program. And we're meeting people that never will make it to a clinic to do this. And so I wanted to discuss what I've learned about substance use treatment in the 2 years of developing this program. And the first thing I've learned is that the problem is massive. I mean, we all kind of get that, but I don't think I even understood it until I was out on these rural roads, delivering supplies to folks and meeting the massive problem and the massive suffering and just the number and the need that's there. So the problem and the suffering that goes with it are massive. The other thing is that there's many, many people, as the Attorney General knows, who have benefited greatly from the traditional treatment programs, the brick and mortar treatment programs. But there is a large group of people, and it seems to be growing, who just do not, those programs do not work. They don't access them. And so we need to have a conversation about that whatever reason these folks don't get to those programs, we need to develop new models of programs. There needs to be a new structure and a new model that treats people where they're at. So this all begins with the acknowledgement that treatment and access to care is a human right, and that the benefits of science, the benefits of medicine should not be limited to those who by their class, but by need. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop a new structure program that will hit this large group of people that the traditional program just doesn't work for them. They just don't access it. In some ways, we're actually just doing an old style program. We're doing home visits, albeit that these are not homes that most folks want to go to. But in reality, it's an old model, but we're taking the treatment to their setting. And so I'm quietly screaming out to those within the treatment community that we need to develop new models that work for those that we're serving. As far as the faith-based, as far as the why, I can speak to my own faith. I will let Michelle speak to Olive Branch's mission. My faith life informs me in my attempt at some form of spiritual practice, but it more specifically calls me to this type of work. And my faith life is informed by several primary things. The first is the Catholic worker movement and Dorothy Day and that long, long history of serving the poor. The second is the Catholic left, which people may not be familiar with, but has a rich, rich history of saying no to death as a social method. Thirdly, I'm deeply informed by the liberation theologians who wrote out of Latin America, out of the poverty and injustice of Latin America, and the rich theology that they wrote about. And that has a tremendous impact on me. And finally, I have a daily Zen practice, which helps me maintain my attentiveness and my presence to the individual in front of me, and helps me try to make sense out of all of it. So let me wrap up. Thomas Merton once wrote that no one can become a saint without solving the problem of suffering. So I don't have any aspirations of pretending to be a saint. I'm only trying to be the best human being that I can be, which is what William Stringfellow reminded us is our true calling. And I'm more certain than anything else in my life that standing with and caring for the poor and suffering, with the destitute and the dismissed, is what makes us truly human. And the mystery in this process is when we become more human through our own self-emptying, through the immolation of our egos, and through the conversion to the other. Merton also told a novice once that the one thing for sure about heaven is there's not going to be much of you there. And so that's what it's about. Finally, one of the most remarkable minds for me of the Latin American liberation theologian was the martyred Jesuit Ignacio Ellacuría. And his understanding of God's preferential option for the poor and its praxis deeply informs my own attempt at practice. Ellacuría understood that the principal sign of our times now, and by whose light all others should be discerned, was what he termed the crucified people. And that is the poor, the dismissed. And the foundation of our life, our vocation as human beings, is to take the crucified people down from the cross, thereby joining in the struggle to reverse a history of inhumanity. And that's all this work is about. At its core is what Ellacuría taught. Thanks for listening.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing the genesis of your passion, which is palpable, and also the description of the work that you do that is making a huge difference in people's lives, whether it's you or Gary or Reggie. I mean, it's all about serving others. So thank you so much. Our next presenter is Reverend Jill Asola, and she is the pastor of Northminster Presbyterian Church in Hickory, and she's a member of the governing board of the North Carolina Council of Churches. Reverend Asola, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
No, you did great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to talk with you all this afternoon. As the Attorney General mentioned, I'm blessed to serve the congregation of Northminster Presbyterian Church, and we are blessed to share some of our physical space with the Olive Branch Ministry. We have space on our campus where the Olive Branch Ministry has offices and meets with clients. And that is a process that is only about 3 years old. It's a process that started at a meeting. I happened to be at a training where the executive director, Michelle Mathis, whom you all will meet in a little bit, was training local area clergy on what was going on in the opioid crisis, and specifically how to save lives with the use of Narcan and naloxone. And one of the things that came out in that meeting in that training that was being provided was that the Olive Branch Ministry was looking for space. And it just so happened that the congregation that I serve had space available, and thus began a relationship. And it has been a journey in partnership with the Olive Branch Ministry. Our congregation in Hickory is a small congregation. We have less than 100 members. We have a small budget. And so the way that we feel as though we're called to serve our community in our midst is complicated because we don't have lots of money that we can give to support some of our partner organizations, but we have space. And so when this opportunity presented itself, we were excited. There was some anxiety that was a part of that process. Not everyone was ready all at once to jump into this idea of harm reduction ministry. But the difference that was made is almost impossible to measure, because in these past few years, as we have grown into deeper relationship with the Olive Branch Ministry, the relationships that have been formed have been life-giving, not just to the members of Northminster Presbyterian Church or to the clients of Olive Branch, but it has started to bring awareness in our community that there are opportunities and options for people to be able to come and receive help. One of the things that I feel personally about faith-based harm reduction is what you'll hear, you've heard it said already, and you'll hear it said again, that faith is the why. I serve a church, and when I think about the church with a big C, the national church, that is a church that has caused a significant amount of harm in the world. And there are things that need to be done so that the church can atone for some of the harm that has been done and work to alleviate some of the pain that has resulted from that harm. The people at Northminster Presbyterian Church and the people that I serve believe that Jesus invites us to care for the vulnerable in our midst. And so one of the things that we hope to do is find ways to serve our community. Hickory in particular has a very large homeless population. And of that homeless population, there are many that struggle with substance abuse disorder and are in need of services. And so we're thrilled to be able to have space to do some of the work that Tim was just talking about, where we can meet people where they are, where they can come and find a safe place to start to get some of their needs met and begin a journey of recovery, if they want to call it recovery, or a journey towards wholeness, or however they would describe that. I would argue that faith is not a requirement for anyone to come and receive services there. There is not a litmus test that someone needs to provide in order to receive any kind of help. What we believe is that we're invited for me and for the congregation that I serve as followers of Jesus to care for God's community in our midst. We believe that everyone that was created by God, everyone is created by God, and that they bear God's divine image. So the invitation is for us to treat one another as though we were treating someone who's bearing God's divine image. And that inspires us to work with compassion, to work with mercy, and to work towards justice, to alleviate the pain that's in the world. And so we do that, and we look for opportunities to learn. We look for opportunities to join in partnerships, and it's a process. It wasn't like we made the decision that we were going to invite the olive branch onto our campus and all of a sudden all of the problems got solved. It has a lot to do with relationships. It has a lot to do with learning people's stories. It has a lot to do with releasing our own need to be right about whatever stigma we have developed or stereotype we have offered, and listening and coming to a part of a journey to allow these relationships to form and to be fostered, and allows for us to care for the vulnerable in our midst, to care for all those who bear God's divine image. And it's such a privilege to be able to work with people and to share in this process of ministry and in this process of what we believe is building God's beloved community in our midst.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Asola. Those are very inspiring words, and it's helpful to hear how you as a church and your congregation and board came to be the partner that you are. And I think we're all inspired. Our next presenter is Kevin Oliver, who is a licensed clinical addiction specialist with 30 years of experience working here in North Carolina. Kevin is founder and CEO of Phoenix Counseling and Crisis Centers, and that organization serves Gaston, Lincoln, and Cleveland counties. And Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. I appreciate the time bringing everyone together, discuss this important issue. As we talk about harm reduction, over the years, it's definitely taking on different roles and definitions regarding how to help people. We work with Olive Branch and many other different programs where we truly enjoy working with Olive Branch because they are the boots on the ground. We would consider, as Tim said earlier, a traditional treatment program. But over the years, I surely know that recovery has many different paths, and no one is right for one person or wrong for another, as long as they get to the door. And that's been our biggest help with all this, is regarding needle exchange, medication management, different types of programs, long-term residential, individual therapy. I think we find that how a person finds recovery, as long as they're getting to the door, is all that matters. There is no right path. They all go for the same way. And I think that, to me, has been the biggest hope regarding everything that's moving forward, is we've put a light to addiction. And instead of this being someone who sleeps underneath the roads and the bypasses, and moving it to maybe our next door neighbor, maybe the individual across the street, maybe a family member, which happens to a lot of us. The great thing about working with church-based programs is it's touching at people at different ways. And I think to us, that's the best point, is how can you reach those individuals, removing them from pre-contemplative, I really don't have a problem, it's not that bad, to contemplative, maybe I need to get help, to really putting action in and getting the help I need, no matter what it takes. Going to church, going to treatment, going to AA and NA and Celebrate Recovery, those self-help programs that are out there. Again, for us, recovery is a journey. It's, as we've heard earlier, there's many different paths, such as Gary and Reverend Longcrier. I think we find the direction is the best way to go. And all in all, I think in the treatment world, we're just happy to be a part of it. I think that's the best part of especially with Olive Branch, when we brought them at our locations. These individuals that are coming off the street, that are still using needles to shoot up. Yes, they're still in active addiction, but there's hope for them. They have hope for themselves, coming to get, new needles, coming to help out with, looking for treatment options. That, to me, is the best thing. We can't shut these individuals off, no matter where they're at. So for us, the incorporation of everything is, to me, is the best part of this, is truly collaborating with every aspect of our communities, allowing those individuals to meet the needs where they're at. I agree with Tim, going out to where they are compared to having them just come to see us in our quote unquote, our rooms, but allowing them to come to our rooms where it's a safe place and they can talk honestly about what's going on in their lives, their past history, maybe some trauma, and deal with those pains and how to move forward in a positive manner. That's the best part, I think, about this, is incorporating traditional treatment with faith-based is truly a good direction. It's not for everyone, but again, not everything is regular treatment is not, and people have gotten clean in the room in self-help programs through church. Again, for me, doesn't really matter as long as they find recovery in their life. So I appreciate the conversation. It's definitely gone a long way over the years. We've been dealing with opioid addiction, oh God, since I've been in the field for 30 years, and has definitely progressed over the time. And it's gotten younger. And we know that, as we talked about, this is mostly for older adults, younger adults, now teenagers. That's really the biggest fear for us, is truly getting these individuals help as fast as we can. That's it for me. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you so much. And thank you for your work and sort of explaining the nexus between more traditional forms of treatment and faith-based services. And the key is, regardless of whatever the source of treatment is, whether it's faith-based or a more traditional facility, that it be evidence-based, that it be using practices that we know are going to save lives. So appreciate your insight onto all of this. And now it takes us to our final presenter, who is Michelle Mathis. Michelle is the executive director of Olive Branch Ministry, and she is the chair of the board of the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. Michelle, thanks for being with us today, and look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Attorney General Stein, and thank you for those of you who are participating in the panel and for those who are in attendance today. Harm reduction is not something that I came easy to, not something that Olive Branch came easy to. When we were first talking about harm reduction and what that would look like for Olive Branch, we were concerned, as many are, that harm reduction appeared to be enabling. We were currently involved in doing volunteer HIV outreach and education, as well as we had a pretty extensive homeless ministry, but we're not involved in official harm reduction work. Our concern was that we would be enabling people to use drugs, that we'd be enabling people to continue down paths that were destructive, despite the name harm reduction. When we took time to educate ourselves, much as Reverend Longcrier mentioned earlier, we began to realize that harm reduction was indeed enabling, but it enables people to build trusting relationships where they may not have any. It enables people to prevent the spread of HIV and Hep C. It enables people to find a place that is safe and stigma-free and judgment-free. Olive Branch is not perfect, but the work of harm reduction is not perfect either. And I say that because we're all people. We all have journeys. We all have different experiences, but we learn from each other. We are the experts in our own journey. Whether you're a person who uses substances, or you're a person who stands behind a pulpit, or you're a person who bags groceries, or whatever it is, you're an expert in your own journey. So the important work of Olive Branch relies on the experts of the expert opinions and insights of those that we serve. Olive Branch is a resource for people who use drugs. Olive Branch was founded by Karen Lowe and by myself, and our focus has been in extending hope and extending life to those that we encounter. And we hope that everyone who walks through the doors of our offices or that encounter one of our volunteers or ourselves in the field feels that there is hope. We call ourselves hope dealers. And I think that that's an important kind of framework to look at the rest of the work that we do. We provide hope through things like overdose prevention education and the distribution of naloxone for free. That's the medication that reverses opioid overdoses. We provide syringe services where people are able to take control of their health journeys and make informed decisions on about how they're going to use, if they're going to use, where they're going to use, and making sure that they're as safe as possible during that use. We provide hope through peer support, people with lived experience who've been down these roads, who can relate to the individuals who are directly impacted, who are seeking assistance from us. We provide hope through community education, hope to the community that there is a chance that there are opportunities for people to make positive changes, which is what we celebrate in harm reduction. We provide hope through family support, both for families who are dealing with directly impacted people currently and for families who may have lost a loved one due to the overdose crisis. Hope and life are vital. You can't really have one without the other. So where does faith come in? Faith for us is our why. It's not our what, meaning that we don't evangelize. We don't tell people that they need to subscribe to a certain theology, that they need to worship a particular deity or even worship at all. Faith for us simply means that someone met us where we were. And so we are called to do the same, whether that where they are is in the setting of an integrated care clinic like Kevin runs for Phoenix and our offices are there. Whether someone is in the field where Tim is, in a house, in a trailer, in a tent, in a car, in a parking lot of a fast food restaurant. Meeting people where they are, like where I met Gary in the parking lot of a big box store. Meeting people where they are, in the pews of churches where they attend, or in the prisons where Reverend Longcrier is. Wherever people are, they're needing help, they're needing assistance, but they also need hope and someone who is willing to walk beside them and extend a friendly smile, extend a word of encouragement, not a word of judgment, to extend the hope that life gets better. And perhaps they do develop faith. It may be a theological faith, but more than likely, it's faith in themselves that they can have the courage and the determination to take those positive steps. That they have faith in a society that has abandoned them, that has treated them poorly, that has treated them with stigmatizing language and stigmatizing actions. Maybe they develop a faith and that faith is restored, that there are people out there willing to serve and to attend to their particular needs, to support them in their goals in a way that is non-stigmatizing and non-judgmental. Olive Branch is honored to work with the people on this panel in one capacity or another. It takes all of us with an approach that is comprehensive. We are not abstinence-based, but we are not anti-abstinent. We are pro-autonomy for the people that we serve. Again, they are the experts in their journeys. They know what will work for them in that moment. And when they make the decision to take those positive steps, we will be there for them. And if that decision does not come while they're under our care, then we will still be with them. I want everyone to understand that being faith-based simply means for us that our faith is our motivator. But for other agencies who faith is important in whatever capacity, You have the ability to practice harm reduction in a way that doesn't require those theological conversations before you serve someone. Simply be the hands and feet. Do the work. We're not the miracle workers, and rely on the miracle worker to bring the miracle to fruition, whatever it looks like for that particular individual. We may be blessed to see that result while we're working with folks. We may be the one that plants the seed. But ultimately, if we do what we're supposed to do, and we answer the call that we're called to do, which is to serve people who use substances without judgment, without stigma, simply extending hope, life, and love, then we've done our part. And I thank you for today, for allowing me to be part of this and to share a little bit about what Olive Branch does. Thank you.
Michelle, that was tremendous, very inspiring. Thank you for sharing your words and your philosophy. But I also want to thank you more for what you do and how you're helping people turn around their own lives and meet them where they are and try to be a facilitator for them to get to where they want to go. So thanks very, very much. And to all the presenters, I want to thank you for your stories, for your perspectives, for your philosophy. They are all incredible testaments to how a belief in other people, your faith, the importance of community can power life-saving treatment and recovery for people. And tragically, people are struggling. People in this state need harm reduction. They need treatment. They need recovery support. All of these efforts will save lives, and folks need that work right now. I'm very gratified that we were able to help secure $26 billion for the country. North Carolina's share is $750 million, and the funds are to go to evidence-based programs in communities across the state. As I said at the beginning, the bulk of the money, 85%, is going to go to local government, predominantly counties, and they're going to invest in organizations. And if you do this kind of work, I think the panelists today hopefully have helped you broaden your perspective of the kind of work that you can provide and the kind of impact you can have. I'm eager to keep at this work with all of you because it's all about helping people and serving others. So I want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank all the viewers out there for hearing the perspectives of the panelists. And at this point, I'm going to now hand it over to Ellen again. And Ellen, if you can moderate questions for the panelists from the audience, that would be wonderful. And then you can close us out. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask that all of the speakers, panelists, come back on video if you can while I ask these questions. Wonderful. I'm streaming it. First question I have here is for Tim Nolan. Could you please explain low barrier MAT for us? How is it different from other MAT programs?
I will try. Low barrier just means really trying to realize the barriers that are preventing someone from accessing medicated assisted therapy and trying to remove as many of those barriers as one can. So whether it's, so what are the barriers typically? The barriers are you got to come to here and you got to come 5 days a week and you got to go to class, and those are all good things. But some of those things are barriers to someone who has to drive a truck cross country and can't really commit to that. So it's looking at the barriers locally, again, housing, and just trying to facilitate that person to access medication-assisted treatment by removing some of those barriers. One is cost. So we get our folks Suboxone through 340B pricing because we work coordinated with a community health center. So the price of the medicine is greatly reduced. And so by doing that, we not eliminate, but we certainly reduce one of the barriers. So I hope, it's just what are the barriers to this individual accessing treatment, and how can we remove some of those?
Our next question is for Reverend Longcrier. I think there was just a question about where the treatment center you spoke about was located and if it is grant-based. I think he's here, but maybe unmuting. So I'm going to move to a next question, and then if we get him back online, he can answer that. I think this is for the broader group. Does anyone want to talk about the transition from harm reduction to recovery and restoration?
I'll take that. Recovery is what an individual says it is. So I think if we're looking for a direct path from harm reduction or chaotic use to harm reduction to abstinence-based recovery, that doesn't exist. Recovery is neither linear, so it's not yes or no, and it's not the same for every person. It's multiple pathways and multiple destinations. Kevin mentioned earlier getting people through the door. Well, the door looks different for every person. So whereas harm reduction is not anti-abstinence, we've had people who've come in fact, yesterday, sitting here at Phoenix where I am. We had people who came through my door who said, guess what? I've been abstinent for 3 months. I'm so excited. I just wanted to let you know. We also have people who, again, yesterday, an employer called me concerned about an employee. We got him into detox and he will go to inpatient rehab, and his goal is abstinence-based recovery. But we also have some individuals who are not there and they may never get there. But the fact that they've gone from chaotic use, living on the street, to now having a roof over their head, reunification with their family, and are now able to maintain a job and support their family, that is recovery for them, and that is okay.
May I add something to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Also, recovery is abstract. It can be nasty sometimes. Recovery is no one size fits all recovery. People approach it in different ways. You can't say it, well, okay, I did that. Now I'm done. It's ongoing. And nobody knows, when somebody is finished. You can't say, I'm done. I've done that already, So it's ongoing, and it can be messy. But all of us reach it and get there at a different time. And it looks different for everybody, especially those who are recovering.
I wanted to say something about the big word of restoration. That's a beautiful word, but I think that some of the folks a lot of the folks we work with are so marginalized, are so on the edges, that even to restore a sense of their humanity, restore a sense of trust, because many of them really don't trust even the network that they're in, or trust their family, or trust themselves. And so by seeing them again and again and again, and then when they say, will you meet me here, and you show up, you're just restoring their sense of what it is to maybe be human. And that's where it starts with a lot of these folks. It's not like, well, how are you going to get a job at the factory? It really is, you are someone, and I want to see you tonight. So that's where restoration starts.
I would like to say one last thing regarding recovery. To me is also, I agree, it's very abstract. To me, it's always been getting out of the pain that you're in, either physically, emotionally, spiritually, just getting out of that pain. What's causing you pain at that moment? To me, that's recovery. Each person has their own, you're right, their own direction, what it is to them and what works for them. And again, that's the big thing, is they can't go back to where they were, but again, what's causing that pain in their life at the moment. So to me, that's sort of restoring that recovery based piece.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question about if the program uses any holistic approaches or any nature therapy.
I'm not really an outdoorsy person, so nature is not my thing. But I will say that we do have holistic approaches. Prior to COVID, we were hosting art classes, and they were taught by people with lived experience, people who were in abstinence-based recovery, who wanted to volunteer the time to help folks find a creative outlet. That we were very fortunate in because that caused us to have a lot of art supplies. So we have had individuals who've come in who say their biggest barrier to abstinence-based recovery is the fact that they're bored. So we give them easels and canvases and paintbrushes and paint and allow them to take those home with them to help ease that boredom, but also to give them a creative outlet. We've had individuals come in who have volunteered to do centered mindfulness meditations, to do yoga. We've had a drum circle in partnership with Northminster. We do those types of things that are a little bit non-traditional, but they feed the entire body, spirit, and mind. We do that not just for our program participants, but we open it up to the community. So if someone comes in and they're doing yoga right next to someone else, they're not worried about what chemicals are in someone's body. What they're worried about is focused on being centered in that moment at that particular place. And it allows us to be able to destigmatize some about what a person looks like who uses substances. No one knows who anyone is in the room. They're simply there, united in one goal, whatever that particular activity is. To me, that's pretty holistic.
And holistic also, and I love that Michelle has allowed me to get out and meet people where they're at. So as a medical provider, I don't think we know how much so many of these folks hate going to a clinic and really hate the way they're treated by other clinic providers. And so just doing that natural setting is very holistic, I think. I'm a Western provider, Western medicine, but we're trying to do it in a middle of the road way.
The question here about resources about evidence-based substance use disorder treatment that would be shareable to other faith-based organizations in a way that speaks to them. So I think just folks looking on the call that might want some resources for their own organizations to look into this.
North Carolina Council of Churches is an amazing resource here in North Carolina. If you're interested in bringing this type of information to your particular community, you can reach out to Elizabeth Brewington, who was mentioned earlier by the Attorney General, and she is happy to schedule a faith leadership, which doesn't just include faith leaders, but communities of faith, event in your particular hometown. And that will bring speakers in, information, education around how the North Carolina Council of Churches is helping to facilitate addressing the overdose crisis in North Carolina. Additionally, specifically for faith in harm reduction, you can Google faith in harm reduction. There's a link on our website, or go to faithandharmreduction.org. And there is a plethora of resources and liturgy that all address substance use disorder and how we as people of faith can implement harm reduction in both conversation, liturgy, and in practice in our own congregations and communities of faith.
I think Elizabeth has dropped some of those helpful links in the chat, so thank you for that. We also have a question here about settlement money. So who is overseeing where the money goes once it gets to the local level? So I think this is just a question about how that spending will happen and who's overseeing it.
I can speak to that, Ellen. The agreement requires that the funds be used for evidence-based practices, harm reduction, treatment, recovery, or prevention. That doesn't mean that the county commissioners can give it to some organization that just doesn't have any experience in this because those practices may not be evidence-based. And what I've liked about what I've heard today is that even though a lot of these folks come from a church basis where faith is central to what they're about, I mean, it's why the church exists, they allow for other strategies beyond just abstinence to be permitted. For some people, abstinence works. For other people, medication-assisted therapy works. Maybe they're on medication for 6 months, maybe they're on for 2 years, maybe the person's on medication for the rest of their lives, because substance use disorder is a chronic disease. Just think about diabetes. There are some people for whom, if you get if the doctor tells you you have diabetes, exercise and diet takes care of them. There are other people who need to be on medication for a year or two to get their diabetes under control, and then they're fine. But there are other people for whom they are on medication for the rest of their lives, and that's fine. It's individually based. There are two ways to ensure that the money is well spent. One is the public. You all are empowered because we've created a database, a dashboard on a website. The website is ncopioidsettlement.org. And Ellen, why don't you put that in the chat? ncopioidsettlement.org. The website's already up, and it's got dashboards to help local leaders by knowing what the social determinants of health are in their community, what the opioid crisis is like in their community in terms of ED visits and overdose deaths, as well as ideas that other counties are doing across the state. And finally, and this is where the public accountability comes into play, every local government has to disclose exactly who they granted the money to, how much did they grant the money to that organization, and the kicker, what were the outcomes? What was the impact of that money? Because getting money and putting it out the door is of no use if it doesn't transform lives. And that's what we want. And so if county commissioners are out there giving it to their favorite pet organization that doesn't have any kind of track record or demonstrated success in opioid use disorder, hold your county commissioners accountable. Don't let them get away with it. And if the county commissions end up giving the money to fill in potholes or property tax relief, things that are not permitted by the agreement, I can go to court and hold them accountable and prevent future payments to them. So the public is the ultimate source of accountability, but I have tools at my disposal as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to close us out with a sort of question that I hope gets at a bunch of different comments I've seen here in the question and answer feature. There is still a sort of healthy dose of skepticism about it needing to be faith-based in order to receive treatment. I know we've talked a lot about that during this session. It's also been a specific request for Gary to speak about his experience again. I think some people were late on the call. So just want to give everyone an opportunity to sort of respond to some of that skepticism and sort of talk about sort of the what and why distinction that we've gone over here one more time.
Yeah, I've been reading the questions in the chat. I think that one thing people don't, our work comes out of our faith, but faith is really not mentioned. I've been doing this now, I think about 5 years, and I never even get in a conversation with people about my faith or their faith, or it really has nothing. It's just because we're talking about it today. And one could even say, maybe I'm a little preachy today. I hope not. But there's none of that in the field or in the work.
Gary, do you want to comment? I saw you typed in some comment on how your perspective on this is. Can you let everybody know what it was that you were commenting earlier?
Yeah, I've never been really a religious person or, faithful or anything like that. Never really. And I was apprehensive with the whole faith-based, recovery, and also with NA and AA, the whole higher power thing and all of that. So had I known that it was going to be like it was, I would have probably pursued that a lot sooner than I did. But when I did finally do it, and I'm thankful every day that I did, I mean, I've never been in any kind of like awkward conversation, or I've never had any kind of religious beliefs, brought up or pushed off onto me or anything like that at all. I've never been asked to go to church or anything like that. I've never been, just like in a random conversation, somebody bring up a Bible verse or something. I mean, it's never come up ever. And what I was trying to explain in what I typed earlier, I feel like, at least from my experience with this, the faith part of it for me is having, like them having the faith in me as being a good person and knowing that I can come back to that. And that's just the best way I can explain it.
Can I comment on that? Okay. What we have an alternative track. A lot of people that come to Exodus know about our the church and what have you, and some comes primarily just to get the church part. But then there's an alternative track. If there's Bible study on Wednesday night, everybody doesn't have to go to Bible study. There's an alternative track. You can go into an outside meeting. You can go on Sundays. You can go somewhere else if at 11 o'clock service. There's an alternative track. Whatever you choose, you choose your point of recovery and how you recover. We've had people come in as Muslims. They choose to go to the masjid. That's their business. They can go to the masjid. We have people that are atheists. They don't want to do church, but there's always an alternative track. We've had other people of different faith preferences. They choose their way of recovery, what's going to work for them. And so we have an array of various things and meetings that people can attend, and they work out their own recovery while they're there. And it's a safe place to do it in. That's what we do. We provide a safe place for you to recover.
Thank you. I think that was very helpful for everyone on the call and sort of in the comments, and I think is responsive to what a lot of people were asking about. So thank you for taking the time to circle back on that. So all the questions that I have from the chat, I want to thank all of you for participating, and everybody who's in attendance sat in and listened to this important conversation. So thank you for being here with us. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you all the panelists. Really